Hello, everyone. Welcome to Please Like What I Like. My name is Joseph Gladding, and I'm here as always with my brother Michael Gladding. And today we're going to be talking about the 1976 Sidney Lumet classic Network.
I like to think that I do not ask for much. You don't have to sit with me, look at me, we don't have to touch. You don't have to go for a ride on the back of my bike. Please like what I like.
Michael, take it away.
So yeah, Network you've probably heard of, even if you were born way after it was made. I was born after it was made. Network's a classic that was already praised up and over every year since it came out in '76. You can find plenty of people in the intervening years who have revisited it and called it ahead of its time or prophetic, but I want to say that these people are wrong. Like Kevin Smith says about Clerks as a movie that he could only have made when he made it. And I would say the same thing about Network. The big difference between those two is that Clerks is very much a private story. It's two men and the struggles they have reconciling their jobs with their souls. Network is very decidedly in the public sphere to such an extent that two of the main characters have a 6-month love affair, and we barely see any of it in the movie. We just kind of see the beginning and end of it. Network keeps reminding the viewer of contemporary world events, doesn't want its audience to think of the real world as separate from the world of the fiction of Network, even though the story is fictional.
It tries very hard to not be timeless in a very pointed way.
Yeah, if Network were made 20 years earlier than the fourth slot that was it UBS? UBS fills in the movie would have been filled by the Dumont Network, TV network that existed in the 30s, 40s, and I think the early 50s. And if they waited 10 years more to do it, then Fox would have filled that slot.
And they took notes on this movie.
Yeah, I would say so. So yeah, that fourth slot, you see that sort of division into four from the very opening shot of the movie when we see the three other networks represented as TVs in that opening shot. You can see Cronkite at the bottom. I forget the name of the other two newscasters. I think one of them, I think the top left guy, was very involved in that debate that you hear a lot about with Nixon and JFK, where like Nixon was ahead in the polls and then they got them both on TV. And suddenly JFK was way ahead of the polls. These are TV newsmen that were very influential in their time. So when the movie sets up UBS and Howard Beale as being particularly influential, it's not predicting some event that might happen if we're not careful. It's showing us the world as it was. This is very soon before Ronald Reagan would be voted into office in a landslide. And I think he was already in government in California. So, electing the guy on the TV to office was something that was already happening. So, yeah, we'll probably go more into world events that are referenced in the movie, but something I wanted to make a point of up front is that if Network seems prophetic, it's because the issues it points out were never alleviated, let alone solved. They're kind of inherent problems to global capital, something that's, not subtly brought up in the movie. We have that big speech by Mr. Jensen towards the end that kind of lays everything out. The reason Beale can't just give his understanding of the way the world works on TV without some interference is because he's just getting started on figuring these things out, but because he's right about the control that money has over what goes on the box.
Mhm.
That's it for my opening statement. I kind of talked my way out of breath. Give me a second.
Just say that this movie kind of points to the kind of asinine approach to capitalizing on information
Yeah.
because real information costs a lot more than it's worth, and in order to make a profit, you're not going to just go on the air and give out information. So its privatization is both pointless and futile, and it will end up with just generated lies, which is where we started going in the 70s, and we're firmly there now.
Faye Dunaway's character, I think the movie makes her the most obvious personification of what you just said, the problem that they both want to profit off true information, but they also don't want to play their hand so much that the public knows everything that's going on.
Faye Dunaway truly understands that the future of television lies in sensationalization
Hmm.
and just getting people's attention more
Yeah.
so than anything that's actually on the
Yeah,
TV.
she kind of says the quiet parts loud in a lot of this movie, and I guess that's partially because she's not the one on TV, so she can say whatever she wants.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think a lot of people that kind of misunderstand this movie kind of jump on her as the villain, whereas, the system itself is the villain, as it often is in stories about power. I made a short list, although it's not everything in the movie, but I made a short list of world events that get brought up in the movie. The most obvious one to me, because of like how big a deal it ends up being, is the Symbionese Liberation Army and their kidnapping of Patty Hearst. They bring up the actual event in the movie, so it's not like they're replacing the Symbionese Liberation Army with the ecumenical was it Ecumenical Citizens Army or something like that?
Yeah, Ecumenical Liberation Front.
Yeah, okay.
But I just wanted to bring up real quick that it seemed like Paddy Chayefsky had
Hmm.
learned the word ecumenical the day before because he put it in the screenplay in another spot when, during the conversation about the world economy
Mm.
replacing the world government.
Yeah, I think Faye Dunaway uses it.
And both of those definitions are not the primary definition of ecumenical, which has to do with churches, not just things being
Mm.
worldwide. So it just sounds like a guy learned a word and put it into his screenplay as much as possible because it's used in different ways
Yeah,
throughout.
I kind of wonder if originally he was going to have the Ecumenical Liberation Front just be the Symbionese Liberation Army, and they decided it would be safer just to create a secondary group.
Yeah, I think that sounds probably right.
Yeah, because like their holdup of the bank looks a lot like the Symbionese army in the bank that they hold up with Patty Hearst, right
Hmm.
down to like the intently shooting over everyone's head and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It's a little weird, I think, how close the made-up plot point is to the world event, which is why I wonder if they changed that at the last minute, because it's weird to have such a closely rhyming event right after the real one. Unless Chayefsky thought that was going to become an epidemic.
Hmm.
Oh, while we're bringing up Paddy Chayefsky, do you know that he had Final Cut in this movie?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it's the only incident I can think of a writer being given Final Cut, but that's just not something I know about.
Yeah, I wouldn't know if that were true or not, but it sounds very rare for sure.
I think he already was like a guy with a lot of clout by then. Most of his big movies were behind him at this point.
Hmm.
Okay,
But
so
about the ecumenical group, I just wanted to say a network funding a terrorist group sounds 100% believable.
well, like that's something that
If it was profitable, they would.
if you follow like left-leaning politics, it's something that comes up a lot.
Mhm.
Is the capital co-opting the aesthetics of revolution to sort of take its power away,
Oh, for sure.
while also profiting off the way that people actually feel about things.
Mhm.
It happens. If the people that made this movie knew the song "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," they should have put it in the movie.
Yeah.
More modern events. So New York City in the 70s was deep in debt and was unable to pay. Subsequently, the people that it owed money to, the financial institutions it owed money to, were able to force an austerity measures that would drive up poverty and crime rates in the area. And that's kind of why in 70s and 80s movies, New York always kind of looks like such a piece of garbage, is because it was kind of forced into a situation where it had to let its urban poor sort of wallow. And it's also why, if you want to argue about United States crime rates, you've always been able to say that they're on the decline since the 70s. So you can't really use that excuse when you're talking about the 70s, but whenever somebody says, oh, I wouldn't let my kid go out nowadays everything's so bad, you can say crime's been on the decline since the 70s.
And 70s was also the golden age of the serial killer.
Yeah, that New York City's debts are brought up. The oil crisis comes up a lot in this. OPEC's growing power over a global economy.
Mhm.
The American media had a bad habit of looking at this issue in a xenophobic light. Like, the problem isn't that the oil industry has so much control over American politics. The problem is that the wrong kind of people have the money, which is something you see a lot when people are worried about global capitalism but haven't actually sit down and thought about it yet. They end up kind of falling back on xenophobia. Like, if
Well, yeah, money is just another type of
yeah,
power, and the people who deserve power are never the type who end up with it because, power obtaining methods are rarely positive.
and like if this movie had been made in the 80s, the oil barons of Saudi Arabia might have been replaced by Japanese tech industry giants. If it was made nowadays, it might be Chinese industry,
Hmm.
different faces, same idea.
If it was made 10 years before, it would be Rescue.
Oh, yeah, true. Okay, well, yeah, the oil crisis looms large in this movie, and it ends up being tied into the final resolution in the same way that the ecumenical army is. The oil crisis would end up dominating. Sorry, what's the president that did Habitat for Humanity?
Jimmy Carter.
Carter. Oil crisis would go on to sort of ruin his reputation during his presidency. Although, if it wasn't that, they would have done something else. And yeah, all I've got after that are kind of more general trends: waning regulation and increasing privatization, and global unrest, coups, and civil wars. I don't think those two things are necessarily unrelated, but they're kind of only broadly gestured at in the movie. I think it's a very interesting decade, and I like a lot of movies and music from it. What'd you think of the network?
Well, I loved it.
Yeah?
But although I think I would love any version of this. I like the script, and the actors are all so good that Ed Wood could have made this movie.
Yeah.
It's just like one of the greatest casts of genius performers. All of them are giving some of the best performances of their career.
Yeah.
Ned Beatty as Mr. Jensen is in the movie for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like he stole a show.
I think he got a Best Supporting Actor nomination out of it.
Yeah, he killed it. He absolutely killed it. It was so great, and like everybody's great in this movie. It was just performance after performance.
Yeah.
And the script had dark humor and drama, and it had everything, and it chugged along at such a good pace. And I really liked it.
I've tried to catch up on more Lumet movies to prep for this. Most of his stuff doesn't seem to be streaming anywhere, which is a shame. But
I'd
I've
only
noticed
seen Dog Day Afternoon previously.
Yeah, I rewatched that getting ready for this, and I definitely connected with it more now than I did then. Although at the time I originally saw it, I was a teenager and watching it on I think VH1. So it was definitely edited.
Yeah.
But I think Lumet is kind of a subtle director.
Oh, that's all I want to talk about.
Yeah, his big strength seems to be getting out of the actor's way.
Mm-hmm.
He just gives them good things to say and just lets them go all in on it. That's something you can count on his movies for, is good dialogue delivered passionately.
Yeah, but there was especially that scene I just praised, the performance of Beale and Mr. Jensen in the conference room. It was the first scene in the whole movie. It comes, maybe an hour in or in 10 minutes in. And it was the first time in the movie that I felt like it was being directed, and there was some meaning behind camera placement and blocking and mise en scène, and this set decoration was actually done. But then I feel like it fizzles out, he doesn't do anything with it. I feel like at first it was great to have Jensen in that camera angle where he's kind of highlighted by the green lamps and sitting at the end, and he's at first not getting through to Beale. And it kind of symbolizes that, he's not getting through, and he's little and far away in Beale's mind. And then he kind of crosses over when he's getting through. But I feel like it's not directed as well as it's written. I bet that is how it is in the screenplay. And it looked like they just plopped the camera down and shot. But it could have been way more powerful. It kind of reminded me of there's a scene in Chinatown where it's just them talking. Faye Dunaway and Jack Nicholson are talking. Just there's a table between them, and the way they move throughout this scene, and the way they're matches up to where their power dynamics change, and the way the conversation goes. It's this elegantly directed scene that never really feels over directed. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm watching a direction, but at the same time you get emotionally through their positions across what's happening in the story. And I feel like this one, that was set up in the script for him to do it, and he just kind of plopped the camera down and filmed it.
Well, I think with that scene also, the effect that Ned Beatty's getting out of it is all stuff that Jensen set up, he's not being imbued with persuasive abilities that he doesn't have in that scene. He's not tapping into something. He's walked Beale into this room, affected the lighting himself, and put him on opposite sides of the table himself. So, just letting the character do what he came here to do, I think, is effective enough. And we do get that like reverse shot littered in of Beale, his
Yeah.
face just falling.
Yeah, up close.
It starts to look like a frightened dog,
Hmm.
just cowering.
Yeah, but like that could have been utilized. Like there could have been the slow
Okay.
encroachment of Jensen as he was getting through to Beale, because as I said, it starts off Jensen's little and far away, he's not getting through to Beale, and it could have been like done up a little more as he's getting through to him. He can
Yeah.
walk in on him, and then the camera can
Mhm.
follow him, and it could have been beautifully done. And it seemed like Sidney Lumet was just like,
Okay.
no, it's fine, and it is fine. But I feel like it could have used some finesse. And I got this quote from not the cinematographer of this movie, but another frequent Sidney Lumet collaborator, Ron Fortunata.
Okay.
Sidney flips if he sees a look that's too artsy.
Okay.
So it's just like he doesn't like it. He wants to get the real. He doesn't want you to feel his camera.
Mhm.
And it's just not a style that normally speaks to
Okay.
me. I want I want a director to be the artist of
Okay.
the piece. I want to feel their hand. I want to feel like an auteur has crafted an art piece and I'm experiencing it. And I feel like Sidney Lumet is part of a camp where the director is more of a talent curator and manager. And like I'm not here to say like there's anything wrong with that.
No.
Because there isn't. And I feel like that takes skill, and he does it better than almost anyone ever. And I really did like this movie, and I loved it. But I just thought it was an interesting little thing to talk about the art versus the management kind of style. And like I felt like I never really noticed that in myself until this movie because I liked this movie so much. And I was like, so to me, this movie is great, but I probably won't add it to my collection.
Okay. Yeah.
For that reason. What do you think about, like, do you think about this normally when you watch movies, or does it interest you to think of those two different styles and
I don't know
what they mean and maybe where you fall on it?
I guess I don't really like fantasize about how I would have done a movie a different way, I guess. Although, I mean, like, I don't know. I think of the little things, like sometimes I say I would have made such and such change in a script, or I would have like preferred music in certain scenes or something like that. But like, I don't tend to think about how stuff was shot on such a nitty gritty.
Well, I'm not talking about the nitty gritty that I brought up. I just mean in general. Do you have a preference, or is it just like you don't really care one way or the other? You like both equally?
Yeah, I don't think I have a preference. There's some times where like I really like directors that are bringing a lot of themselves to the table. Like I love, what was that guy who did Eternal Sunshine and Science of Sleep? Michel something.
Michel Gondry.
Michel Gondry. Like he brings a lot to his movies that aren't actually just like happening from the script. He's bringing a lot extra.
Flair.
Whereas, but like I also like subtle stuff too. Like my next pick is a very subtle and minimalistic one.
But things can be subtle and minimalistic and still have a lot of artistry to them.
That's true.
Like Yasujiro Ozu is a very artistic director, and
but
by
he
the
also
end of his career, he
subtle.
didn't move the camera at all. And he's got a defining artistic touch.
Yeah.
But it's still subtle. Sidney Lumet, I feel like he doesn't have an artistic touch. I feel like he just gets the right people together and he controls the chaos that is filmmaking very well.
I watched like behind the scenes of Dog Day Afternoon, and I watched Lumet's version of Long Day's Journey into Night, and it's like in the first case on Dog Day Afternoon, like the way that was set up, he tried to save money by like having them practice on a soundstage where the actual bank wasn't there, but everything was mapped out on the floor, and they'd run through the movements over and over again, so that they only had to do it once or twice on the day.
It's kind of like Cassavetes style.
But then also, when he actually went to make the movie, he kind of ran Al Pacino ragged, just so he could get that kind of look of exhaustion for the later scenes, which is kind of goes against all the prep work they did.
Yeah.
So like, there's, I think, a meeting in the middle going on there where he's not just leaning back. There's sometimes he's willing to go an extra mile to get something that's not necessarily there.
Yeah.
And then Long Day's Journey into Night, that's just a filmed play. And a lot of it is very, very, just point the camera at the scene and let them do what they're doing. But towards the end, Do you have any idea what that movie's about? Or what that
No,
play's about?
I've never seen it or the play.
Well, it's Eugene O'Neill, who's very depressing, but I like him a lot. He also did The Iceman Cometh,
Mhm.
which is a great play. Both stories are about addiction, The Iceman Cometh and Long Day's Journey into Night. And towards the end, in Long Day's Journey, Katharine Hepburn is coming downstairs, and she's now as high as,
Mhm.
she's been slowly taking morphine over the course of the movie.
Mhm.
And towards the end, she's like in space. She can barely hold a conversation. And the camera just focuses in on her, and she sits down at the table and just starts like talking to herself and reminiscing about old times and stuff.
Mhm.
And the camera just slowly pans back over this like really long monologue until like the three characters in the scene and the table are the only thing lit. And there's just this huge blackness that's taking up like 5/6 of the screen. And that's
Yeah.
something that wouldn't have been in the script.
Yeah, that's something that would stay with you,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So like I think he brings that kind of thing now and then, but he's not the kind of guy to do Michel Gondry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's not going to put a bunch of special effects that are just getting across extra emotion, you know. I think there's a place for both. I think the little choices he makes, like that one I just brought up,
Yeah.
have a bigger effect than they would if he was doing that kind of stuff all the time. But yeah, I wouldn't call Lumet, he's not in my top 5 or anything. So I do think I like directors that make a bigger impact on their own work than someone who just thinks of themselves as a cog in the machine, you know?
Yeah, and like I was thinking about it, just while I was watching about because I know Sidney Lumet came from theater,
Mm.
but like I also don't think that is a factor in this discussion as I initially did
Really?
because there's people like Bob Fosse and R.W. Fassbinder and Orson Welles. They all came from theater and they all rang every last artistic thing that cinema could give them in comparison
Yeah.
to theater. They all used the editing and the camera movement and the different styles of blocking actors in cinema as opposed to the theater and using the camera as a character in the blocking and the mise en scène, and they
Mhm.
would set decorate beautifully and they'd have pops of color on the screen, and they all came from theater, you know what I mean? And so, like, I don't think that is a defining
Yeah.
factor.
I think though, I think they bring their history in theater with
Well,
them,
for
even
sure.
if like they're making a lot more and more decisions you can't make as a theater director. I think that some things are gonna stick with you, and in Lumet's case, it affected him more in like what he's not going to do. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
it seems like in order to approach directing in that way as more of a facilitator or manager, you got to kind of be content to deliver the source material, but you could never hope to
Mm,
elevate it.
okay. Yeah, I guess that also kind of ties in with Chayefsky having final cut.
Mhm.
If your allegiance is to the source material, Lumet's final cut would be whatever makes Chayefsky happy, right?
Yeah, but so yeah, that whole diatribe I went on wasn't a critique on the movie. I want to say again that this was a 10 out of 10 movie for me, and I really liked it.
Mm.
I just thought that would be an interesting conversation for you and I
Yeah,
to have.
it just made you think about what approach you prefer and what you would have done.
Yeah, yeah. It was just like I normally would watch a movie like that and find it flat and boring.
Mm.
But I think everything else picked up my appreciation of that, and I do not believe that Sidney Lumet was not the cause of me liking it. Like I'm not saying like
Mm.
I would have liked it more if he wasn't the director. I'm saying this was an unusual movie for me to like because of that fact.
Mm.
And I don't think I would have liked it more if it was a different way or not. You know?
Yeah, yeah. Are you the kind of person who believes that one should give content warnings for when there's certain material that touches on subjects that people with a history dealing with those subjects are going to have a hard time getting through?
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with preparing someone for what's in your piece of work, but I
Yeah.
don't believe in censoring your piece.
Oh, yeah. Do you think we should give one for a discussion of suicide on this one? I think this one kind of wallows in Beale's early suicidal ideation and kind of handles it weirdly lightly at the beginning, but like also like it works it into the theming and it foreshadows the end.
Mhm.
but like I don't know, it brings it up with like a joke, and then like contrasts that with Beale saying he's gonna shoot himself, and then he actually does say on the air that he plans to shoot himself. I don't know. I feel weird about it. Do you feel weird about it?
Yeah, I feel weird about it. And our next movie is almost completely engulfed in the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. All right, maybe I'll put like a text one when I put the
Yeah,
episode up or something. 'Cause it's too late to add it to the last episode.
yeah.
This movie, I think if it were made even 5 years later, might have chosen different political angle than it did. Because every like, even Reagan at the time, like most people who go from celebrity to like interceding politically tend to be loudly right leaning, right? Whereas, Beale at first has no he doesn't actually have anything to say. He's like, the Bob Dylan song, Times They Are a Changin'?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like that. Like that song keeps threatening us that things are really going to change, but doesn't say how and what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, like Bob Dylan was very self-conscious about that, and people would hear him fooling around with it or see the lyrics that he wrote down. And he would be like, as soon as I can figure out what this is a protest song about, I'll finish it. I don't think he ever figured it out. So, yeah, that's kind of how Beale starts. He's angry, wants everybody else to get angry, but he's not sure what. He makes vague points about crime, and like I said about the New York City thing, and he's in New York City at the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then like that there was definitely something that people were complaining about, and not just being a knee-jerk "o tempora, o mores" thing. Yeah, he's not just being an old man about it. There was actually crime on the rise at the time in New York. And he brings up oil, but he doesn't seem to know why he's bringing up oil. So yeah, the early speeches he gives are very unfocused, and he's already puts himself in a situation where he has to find something to point at.
Yeah, I think the fact that he is unfocused and just shouting is what gets him on the air in the first place. I think if he had chosen to shout anything, they would have been like, we can't have him on the air shouting this.
Well, I don't think it. I was agreeing before I knew what exactly.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that would have, like, if he had chosen what he did end up choosing, then yeah, they probably wouldn't have put him on the air. But I think the whole point in the movie is that, like, the reason why they're starting to work things out with the ecumenical army about putting them on TV and not editing them is that business isn't afraid to put things out there that would argue against it because they don't have to be scared.
Mm-hmm. But they don't get approval to put her on the air until Beale has already been on the air for a little while.
That's true. That's true.
Proving profitable. I was saying before he proved profitable, they wouldn't have made the gamble. Unless he didn't say anything. That's all I was saying.
Well, yeah, Faye Dunaway's character really has to go to bat for that idea because, like, all the old heads in the room are like, everybody's going to complain. But I thought your point was that him being unfocused is why he's able to get so many people on his side.
Oh, yeah, that as well.
Yeah, because everybody's got something they're upset about. If I don't say what I'm upset about, everybody's going to think it's that. It's kind of like Hello Kitty. Like, Hello Kitty's not angry, but her face gives so little information that anybody can identify it.
Yeah, the Ryan Gosling effect. You just have a face and people put emotions on it themselves.
Okay. You look lonely. Anyway, I think at the time, people were more willing to sort of let the far right, far left ideas sort of battle themselves out. There's this is the time when stuff like, was it Point Counterpoint became a show, I think. Like a lot more like political debates on TV were happening. And like people with ideas that wouldn't have been super popular were being at least given the chance to have a good faith argument on TV. I don't know. I wasn't around, so I might be parroting praise for something that I wasn't actually watching. But yeah, I think most of the people we would see on TV saying stuff like, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore to sell you on some progressive right-wing talking points. And I think most people, let's just come out and say, am I the only one of the two of us that was reminded more of Trump than other political people by Beale's story, or am I wrong there?
Oh, I get that for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Just guy yelling word salad and everybody being like, ah!
Yeah.
Oh!
Yeah, Trump was playing the angry old man on TV long before he actually became a presidential candidate that people actually thought might win. And I also think he chose his targets after he figured out what would make him even more popular, and not because he felt strongly about much, although he does seem to feel very strongly about xenophobia. Anyway, let's not get distracted by Trump, but yeah, it goes against the whole, like, the guy's going to come from the left idea. But I think one of the reasons why they do end up focusing more on left-leaning politics is so that, they can go into the ecumenical society being used as hitmen at the end without talking about something completely different than what they've been talking about the whole movie. And also,
I think they were doing it because at the time Gerald Ford was president. And so if it was a Democratic president, it probably would have been Republican politics.
Yeah, you're probably right.
That they were talking about, because he wouldn't be arguing for the politics of the day and it'd be a sensational news story. If he was a right-wing weirdo, he would be like, I like everything that's happening now.
Yeah, that's true. You can't go on the air and be like, I'm angry that more people aren't supporting the establishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for bringing that up. I also think that allows the script to poke fun at the far left politics and their tendency to keep splitting up. Like, no one can agree 100%, so they start forming new groups, and you just end up with a bunch of scattered groups with slight differences, and no one has a wellspring of support. And then you've got Hobbs, who turns out to be a grifter, basically. Talks a good game, but as soon as somebody gives her a chance to make money, she'll sell out.
Yeah, and she's talking about her profit margins just like that.
Yeah, she's great. She's one of my favorite characters in the movie. I love hearing her yell.
Yeah. The I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore rant still had a lot of power despite being so prevalent in the zeitgeist for so long. It's like one of those moments where, like, before you see it, you're like, I can picture that in my head and I know exactly how it's going to go. But then you see it's like, it's like the Grand Canyon effect. You just think like, I can conjure that at any moment in my head. It's been so part of the zeitgeist. But then you see it and it's like really great.
Well, people only quote that last line,
Yeah.
They only quote the I'm mad as hell. And in the actual movie, it's like his third time ranting on the air. And like in that one speech itself, he starts off just talking normally and just like goes louder and louder and louder. I think they deliberately modeled both Beale and Jensen after preachers.
For sure.
Like Beale kind of sounds like a TV preacher, like Billy Graham or something like that.
Yeah, and evangelical.
And Jensen's like your fire and brimstone, sinners in the hands of an angry God, kind of old-fashioned preacher. Puts him in his place. That's cool. Oh, before we move away too much from Hobbs, I wonder if her name is supposed to give us a clue early on that she doesn't actually believe in Marxist talking points, because she's named after a monarchist philosopher.
Because it's a smart script. I doubt anything is accidental.
For listeners that don't know Hobbes, I believe he wrote the Leviathan, but Hobbes is a monarchist who has absolutely no faith in mankind's ability to take care of one another, and thinks that if there's not a strong man in charge to keep everything running, then we're all going to rob and mug and attack each other. I brought up Beale and Jensen as preachers. What do you think about the sort of religious aspect of this movie, where Beale seems like he's hearing voices, he has those scenes of him in bed, but he keeps assuring the people around him that he's not talking to God, and I don't know if that's supposed to be that he's self-conscious, and he thinks that sounds crazy if I say I'm talking to God, so I'll say, no, it's not God. But then he doesn't explain what it actually is, and as the movie goes on, he gets less and less shy about telling random passerbys that he's on a mission and stuff like that. Do you think it would have been more effective to have Beale be a pure populist, where he's actually angry about the world as it is, or do you think it adds to the movie to give him some religiosity? Because I could kind of go either way, I think.
Well, I think there's the other aspect, not only is this television station putting this guy on the air who could be harmful to the radio station with the things he says just for the rating. I think it adds kind of another layer that the TV station keeps putting him on the air instead of getting him help because he's obviously unwell. And I think if he was just a guy who was mad, he wouldn't be also unwell.
Yeah, that's his friend at,
Max
at the
Schumacher
TV stations.
Once.
Yeah, he keeps bringing up that the guy needs help.
Yeah, and I think he wouldn't have gotten fired, and then if Max isn't fired, his relationship with Diana isn't as contentious and dramatic. And I think it just sets a lot of things into motion, as well as being kind of cool.
Did you notice that Schumacher's story about the George Washington Bridge ends up being prophetic about Beale? In that, like, it talks about a guy going out to give a news story on the George Washington Bridge, so he runs out in his pajamas and a raincoat.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The guy in the cab thinks he's going to kill himself, and then when Beale actually does show up at the station,
Pajamas.
he's in pajamas and a raincoat, and everybody was worried he had gone out to kill himself.
That's pretty great. I didn't put that together. Speaking of Max Schumacher, for anyone who thinks that the Faye Dunaway, William Holden age gap makes their relationship unrealistic, in real life, William Holden's partner was 1 year younger than Faye Dunaway, and they'd be together for 9 years, and it's TV's Jennifer Hart, Stephanie Powers, from Heart to Heart.
Yeah,
so
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like, William Holden polls, people.
Yeah.
He polls.
Well, also, like, age gaps weren't considered as big a deal at the time. I think part of that has to do with the infantilization of women. But still.
William Holden does look old, though.
Oh, yeah. And, well, I think I wouldn't have thought twice about the age gap if there wasn't that exchange where Faye Dunaway talks about how he gave a speech at her school, that, like, puts him in an authority figure position where at that point it's irresponsible for him to act on it, I think.
I mean, in real life, he was only like 58 or so, maybe even younger than that. He died in 81 and he was only 63. So I can't, what's the backwards math on that? 4 years, he's 59.
I think the guy who plays Beale passed away shortly after the movie.
Yeah,
finished.
he got drunk and hit his head.
Oh, I didn't know
Peter
that.
Finch.
I feel bad for reacting to that with the laugh, but
I think that was him. One of
Peter
them,
Finch.
between the two of them, one of them had a headache and one of them hit his head. Nope. All right. Sorry. That was William Holden who died by hitting his head. Peter Finch died of a heart attack.
Oh, okay. I wanted to rewatch Altered States, but I couldn't find it streaming anywhere. But do you remember enough of Altered States that we could bring it up real quick?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. That was also written by Chayefsky, and I think that both movies have a sort of non-traditional sort of view on religious enlightenment, where the guy, he's not Lily, but he's based loosely on Lily, right? Who's the guy in, we'll just call him Guy in the Tank. The guy in the tank in Altered States.
Edward Jessup.
Jessup. Okay. Ed Jessup in the
Is that
tank.
William Hurt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, William Hurt.
Right. William Hurt, Ed Jessup, a guy in the tank. He's just basically meditating on drugs in a sensory deprivation tank, and through that is able to either think more abstractly about problems in his life, or from his perspective, it helps him tap into some truth outside of himself. But I feel like it's given the same sort of broad abstractness as Beale's, nightly conversations with someone that he says isn't God. And the way he talked, like, he has an extended talk when he's trying to talk Schumacher into letting him continue talking on the air about how he feels, like, electrified,
Mm-hmm.
He goes on and on about how he's been, like, connected to some outside source of truth. And I don't know, is there some connection there where we're supposed to get a hint that, Chayefsky believes in a path to enlightenment that both Beale and the guy in the tank are tapping into? Or is this supposed to be pictures of two guys who think they're being given a pathway to universal truth, but are actually just getting high in a tank or going to sleep? You know what I mean? Is it self-delusion in both cases? Or is this how Chayefsky thinks of the divine?
Maybe both could be true. But, like, I think it is about people looking for some sort of truth, and whether or not what they find is or is not truth is irrelevant to the kind of, like, spiritual journey they're going on.
So both the similarities and the lack of specificity has more to do with that being not the focus of the story than it does with a cosmological understanding, possibly.
Yeah, no idea. But I do know that I like both.
If you went into work tomorrow and somebody was like, last night I felt like I was tapped in to a powerful electrical grid, and after work I've got to tell you all these things I learned about the truth of the universe, what would you do?
Well, I'd buy a notebook on my way to the bar so I could write down everything he said, with his permission, of course.
Oh, okay.
Not that I inherently would go to believe him or disbelieve him, but someone's got something interesting to say, I'll at least listen to.
That's a good attitude, Joe.
Yeah. I think it's a mistake to go into anything wanting to believe or wanting to disbelieve. Because if you want to believe, you're probably going to believe some load of nonsense. Or if you go in wanting not to believe, you're probably going to avoid a good time at the bar with a friend.
That's true. Yeah.
Like,
Don't make a decision ahead of time.
I feel like I've got a good head on my shoulders, and I feel like there's no harm in me hearing anything because I don't make many. I was going to say make many knee-jerk reactions, but I don't do a lot, Michael. I don't think I make any reactions.
Your knee stays firmly on your seat.
Yeah, I hear things. Okay, that could be true or false. You have a nice day, man.
Have you ever seen another thing that I would consider trying to find a copy of to prep for this, but still haven't seen it? But have you seen Broadcast News, the James L. Brooks movie?
That is also on my list,
yeah,
but I have not seen it. Yeah, both these two movies were on my watch list. I just never got around to watching either of them.
Yeah, I'm curious if it would feel like an update on this story, because I think that's about some of the same stuff, although it's not like...
it's also got a terrific cast.
Yeah, well, we'll get back to you if we end up seeing the second. Is there anything you wanted to bring up?
I found out that Sidney Lumet was in the inaugural class of the New York Actors Studio, the famous actors studio.
Is that the Method one, or is that a different one?
It's like the inside the Actors Studio with
that one, yeah, okay. Like, what's your favorite word and stuff like that?
Yeah, with James Lipton.
Yeah, the tea man, heir to the hot tea fortune. I don't know if he is actually connected to Lipton Tea, and I don't know. I'm just goofy.
I just know he's Arrested Development's own James Lipton. But yeah, the network news hour feels indistinguishable from modern news. I wrote that down.
Yeah, just cheaper sets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When did CNN start? Was that like early 80s?
I have no idea.
But
the whole 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny to think like in this movie they're kind of scrambling to fill an hour, and then like shortly after that, 24-hour news would be able to fill multiple cable stations.
The trick is talking really slowly.
Or just say the same thing over and over again.
That's the one they went with. They didn't consult me.
Ninja Turtles are getting really popular, so we just have to, what are turtles known for?
Slow?
Exactly.
Did you see the new movie?
No.
I really want to.
The animation style.
Yeah, I thought it looked so cool, and I just never ended up getting around to the theater.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Lumet. Like we said, Lumet's got sort of a subtle style, but he does have some other big movies under his belt.
The two I've seen are like next level. I really love Dog Day Afternoon, and like I said, I really love this movie.
Dog Day Afternoon is something special. I wouldn't take it as a sign, if you like Dog Day Afternoon a lot, that you'll like more Lumet movies, because I feel like it's one where everything just came together really well on that.
It's got a real emotionally connecting story. Like, it's really easy to buy into that story, and it's a really special story, and I think he got two of the best actors to ever do it together.
Yeah. And it does a great job of letting you know more and more about Sonny as the story goes on.
Yeah,
and it feels like the people in the bank are doing the same thing, because you see them kind of feel like a chosen family by the end of the movie, Yeah, which makes that last shot all the more affecting.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, let's not blow that, though. Yeah, definitely watch Dog Day Afternoon. If you like Network, you'll at least appreciate the writing and directing in it.
I think I liked Network more.
Really? Yeah?
After watching it, I liked its energy a lot.
Yeah, I love both movies for different reasons, I'd say.
Yeah, you don't often see a drama kind of zoomed out in such a way. Like, normally, comedies and stuff are kind of that like wide shot, like bunch of characters all going around.
Yeah.
This is a nice, like, everybody is working on the same drama. Like, it's not a series of interlinking vignettes. Everybody's dealing with the same drama, but there's
Yeah.
a large cast of characters with different stakes. You don't get that a lot.
Yeah, it pulls that off very well.
Yeah, that's rare.
It's a less, like at the top when I talked about how you don't get much of the love affair in the movie. And I think that's because this movie is trying to tell a very public story, and it does it without looking like a bunch of board meetings.
Yeah, I feel like if they were to get into the nitty-gritty of the romance, this would have been like a 3.5-hour movie, because they would have had to get into other people's personal lives. But this is not about their personal lives, unless their personal lives affect the drama of the narrative.
Yeah. At some point, I might want to talk about Shin Godzilla, which I have mixed feelings about, but it similarly attempts to tell a story about more of a public disaster rather than a personal story. And I don't think it's as successful, but it's a similarly interesting movie.
I feel like that's what the first Godzilla movie did.
Back to Lumet. I definitely, if you want to see some of his more subtle, sort of like play-like movies, 12 Angry Men is a classic for a reason. Great movie. If you want to see a movie about arguing, it does a good job. And like I said, I recently watched A Long Day's Journey into Night. It's like 3 hours long. If you're up for watching people be very upset for 3 hours, it's a great play.
That's my bread and butter.
Like Eugene O'Neill. Eugene O'Neill, he can do these like stories about alcoholics really well in a way that I think a lot of people praise Bukowski for, but I think Bukowski, his characters don't seem to, I don't know. I feel like Eugene O'Neill's characters can see why the way they're living feels empty, whereas Bukowski's characters feel smug about their problems. Does that make sense?
I feel as though Bukowski is right about the behavior of Adam.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that in any way to disparage people addicted to things. And like, I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean this with heart and sensitivity, that it is so hard to be not addicted to something because you don't think it is a problem.
Well, like, I mean,
there are people who are addicts and realize their addiction is a problem, but most of the people who are still struggling with it do so benignly unaware.
All right, let me say something. So, like, I'm not saying one is more realistic than the other, but I think if you're going to sign up to get told a story about someone with a substance abuse problem, then you didn't sign up for like a fun time taking drugs or getting drunk, because you wouldn't have called it a story with a substance abuse problem, you know?
Absolutely.
Like, if you're signing up for a movie about alcoholism, then you as an audience member want to see someone grappling with the alcoholism, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I wasn't.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I was just saying, like, they are both things that do occur. Like, people do get better, and people do realize they have a problem. But they're, like...
I'm not saying one is more realistic.
The people in Bukowski, But,
I'm saying one makes better stories.
I still disagree.
No?
I think that there's different types of stories, and you're talking about a 3-act play which should have a resolution that changes a character from the beginning to the end, whereas Bukowski writes character studies, which is where you just study a character and he doesn't owe you anything. All he owes you is a character being studied.
That's true.
I don't think one's worse than the other. I really like movies about pieces of shit who don't become not pieces of shit. It's like my favorite movie, like type.
Yeah, I watched...
I like the Petra von Kants of the world.
I watched Barfly recently, and so that's where my annoyance with Bukowski was coming from. Although I had read a couple
I haven't
of
read
his
any.
novellas.
I have never read a Bukowski, but I have seen Factotum with Matt Dillon. And I recall enjoying it, but not enough to ever rewatch it or anything. Like, it was just something that kind of benignly happened to me. Like, oh, that happened. Yeah, I have no negative or positive feelings about it.
Yeah, I would say all three of my attempts to enjoy Bukowski's work have not panned out super great. And
And
yeah, I'm
feel
just
at
gonna
this
stop trying.
point, yeah, I feel at this point like Bukowski's something you get into in your late teens or 20s, and it hadn't happened for me, and I'd be afraid to try now. It would be like suddenly just deciding to read Catcher in the Rye in your 30s. You'd be like, I don't like this.
Yeah, like I was saying, Long Day's Journey into Night's good. 12 Angry Men's good. I've heard The Hill is good, haven't found it yet. A lot of Lumet's stuff doesn't seem to be streaming for whatever reason. What might be his last movie, or at least the last of his that I've seen, was the one that I also suggested we might do of his, and that's Before the Devil Knows You're Dead.
Before the Devil Knows You're Dead.
Yeah, I like
I
that
have
one.
that on my list independently also of a movie I'm interested in. So if you ever want to do a second Sidney Lumet episode...
Right now, we'll just think of it as a recommendation, and if it's not for the show, then that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good one. Aside from that, I've seen like smatterings of other stuff from his. I didn't like the ones that had Sean Connery in it very much. The Anderson tapes was okay, but The Offense was difficult to watch. The whole movie's weirdly focused on this one incident, and like you see
offense?
it. Yeah, one offense, and you see it like you see it shown in a confusing manner at first, and then you see all the events leading up to that offense, and then you see the aftermath of the offense, and then you finally go back and see it, but like by the time you're seeing it in full, you've seen parts of it all these other times. So I didn't find it very satisfying, but it's a very emotional story. You know, if you want to see a movie about cops that isn't necessarily about solving the crime and is more about the emotional toll that it takes on your mind, The Offense is a unique movie. Next episode is The Ballad of Narayama, which is on Criterion.
The Ballad of Narayama is the 1958 version that we'll be talking about. We are talking about the 1958 version.